The look on Peter's face when I walked into the fundraiser, hand in hand with Noah's boss, was something I'll never forget. His wine glass paused midair, eyes narrowing like he couldn't believe I belonged in the same room, much less beside a man 20 years younger than him and more successful. The lights were low, music soft, and conversations bubbling in the background, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Confident and measured. Peter always thought he was the one who got to dictate how people saw me. But tonight, every eye turned to me. And there I was, not just seen but admired. I leaned in close to Noah's boss, letting my hand rest lightly on his chest as he spoke. Peter stood frozen by the bar. He didn't know yet, not fully. Not the scale of what I'd done. Not what I'd planned. He didn't know how deep this little game had gone. Not yet. But when he did, when he realized who I was to Noah's boss and what that meant for the company his son worshipped, the real fun would begin. Because you see, when Peter told me I was too old for love, for success, for him, I didn't argue. I simply proved how wrong he was. And I made sure the whole world, including his son, watched it happen. My name is Celeste Hunter, and I was 59 when Peter, a man I had loved and supported for years, told me I was too old to be desirable. He said it during dinner, casually, like he was commenting on the weather. What made it worse was that he had already moved on, flaunting a woman half my age like a trophy. He didn't just leave me, he discarded me. And when I found out his son Noah was working for a firm where I had some very old ties, something inside me shifted. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to beg. I wanted him to feel what it was like to be invisible, unworthy, dismissed. So I decided to get close to the one person whose opinion still mattered to him, his son's boss. What started as an idea for revenge turned into something much more, and Peter never saw it coming. When I met Peter, I was 49, divorced, and cautiously hopeful about love again. He was a freshly retired architect, charming in the way that men who are used to being admired often are. We met at a garden center. I was struggling to lift a sack of potting soil, and he insisted on helping. It felt serendipitous at the time. He asked me out right there, over a bed of marigolds, and for a while, I believed I'd stumbled into something rare and worth cherishing. Peter had a grown son, Noah, who lived 2 cities over and worked in real estate finance. I met him only twice in the early years, both times at polite brunches where Peter did most of the talking and Noah mostly checked his phone. I didn't blame him. Peter dominated every space he walked into. He liked to tell stories about his career, his world travels, his brilliant design solutions, usually with me quietly listening, smiling, supporting from the background. That was my role in his world. The woman who nodded. I never minded. I had already lived a full life. I had raised a daughter, Savannah, mostly on my own after her father left us. I worked my way from being a legal secretary to managing office operations at a mid-sized law firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, dignified work, and I took pride in it. After Savannah got married and moved away, I downsized, started taking more painting classes, and spent time tending to my little garden behind the townhouse. I wasn't looking to be dazzled, I just wanted to be seen. Peter made me feel seen in the beginning. He'd show up with flowers, plan little day trips, hold my hand in public. He made a show of being attentive. But over time, the warmth turned performative. His compliments slowed. He rarely asked about my day. He started making little comments about my hairstyle being dated or my reading glasses making me look like someone's grandmother. He would say it with a laugh, as if it were harmless teasing. But it wasn't harmless. It chipped away at something fragile in me. Still, I convinced myself it was just a phase. I cooked for him. I attended his social events. I listened to his rants about city planning and the decay of architectural elegance. He had opinions on everything, including my outfits. "That sweater makes you look tired," he once said while we were getting ready for dinner. I changed without saying a word. The real shift happened around the time Peter started attending business dinners with younger women from the local Chamber of Commerce. He called it networking, but I knew better. His eyes lit up around them in a way they hadn't around me in years. He started coming home later. Once, he came back with lipstick on his shirt collar. I stared at it, and he casually blamed it on a hug from a board member's wife. I told myself I was too mature to play detective. If he was going to cheat, that was on him. But the silence in the house grew thicker, heavier. He stopped inviting me to events altogether. He said I wouldn't enjoy the crowd anymore. I had spent 10 years of my life with this man, and somewhere along the way, I had become invisible to him. But the final insult came not through infidelity, but through his words, one sentence, tossed at me like it was a fact. We were at dinner. I had made pasta from scratch. He barely touched it. He looked at me and said, "You know, Celeste, you're getting a little too old for all this fuss. You should think about aging more gracefully." I remember the silence that followed. I remember how the sound of the clock ticking suddenly felt louder than anything. I looked at him and nodded. Not because I agreed, but because something finally clicked into place. I had loved him. I had supported him. And I had been reduced to a woman who should age more gracefully. The next morning, I packed up his shirts, folded them neatly, and placed them on the bed. I told him it was time for him to network elsewhere, permanently. He moved out with minimal protest, which confirmed everything I already suspected. I mourned the relationship for exactly one day. Then I got to work. I remembered something Noah had mentioned in passing at one of those brunches years ago. He worked at a boutique real estate firm downtown. He had been trying to impress Peter, complaining about how difficult it was to land new high-profile clients in such a competitive industry. Peter, of course, had dismissed him. Said real estate was a step below designing spaces that mattered. But I hadn't forgotten the name of the firm. And I had a connection there. Before my time at the law firm, I'd spent 3 years working as a private executive assistant for a man named Ellis Vaughn, the founder of that very boutique firm. We had parted on warm terms. I had helped him secure some critical property documents during a legal crisis, and he had told me, "If you ever need anything, Celeste, call me." So I did. Ellis remembered me right away. His voice lit up when I introduced myself on the phone, and within minutes, we were catching up like old colleagues. When I told him what had happened, in vague terms, not naming names, he listened carefully, then invited me to lunch the next day. We met at a small Italian place downtown. Ellis looked older, more silver at the temples, but his eyes still held that sharp, calculated warmth I remembered. I told him about Peter, the years I had poured into the relationship, and the way it had ended with a single cutting remark, "You're too old for all this fuss." Ellis didn't flinch. He just sipped his espresso and said, "Well, that's a hell of a thing to say to someone like you." I smiled genuinely for the first time in days. Then I leaned in and asked him if he still ran Vaughn and Carter Real Estate, and if by any chance he needed someone who knew her way around legal paperwork, internal operations, and difficult men. He didn't hesitate. I could use someone like that yesterday. Within 2 weeks, I was back in the swing of a fast-paced office, assisting Ellis directly and managing everything from investor reports to hiring interviews. I hadn't realized how much I missed the rhythm of it, the challenge, the precision, the satisfaction of a job well done. And then, one Friday afternoon, I saw the name on a client acquisition folder that made my heart stop. Noah Wentworth, Peter's son. It was a request for a meeting, apparently arranged through one of our junior agents. Noah had started his own boutique firm a few blocks away, and word around the office was that he was desperate to build connections after a series of failed commercial property deals. Now he wanted a partnership with Vaughn and Carter to boost his legitimacy. I didn't say a word at the time. I simply made sure I was present when he came in for his first consultation. He didn't recognize me right away. It had been nearly a decade since we last saw each other, and I looked different, sharper clothes, a confident stance. Ellis introduced me as Celeste, my right hand, and Noah barely blinked. He pitched a proposal that was flashy but riddled with red flags. Over-leveraged projects. Vague funding sources. Overpromises with no solid data. Ellis smiled politely through the whole thing, but I could tell he was unconvinced. When Noah left the room, I gave Ellis my take, calmly and precisely. He's desperate. And he's not being honest about where his backing is coming from. Ellis nodded. I thought so. But he's Peter Wentworth's son, isn't he? I didn't answer. I just smiled and handed him the research I had already prepared. The next day, Ellis declined Noah's proposal, kindly but firmly. But he left the door open. We'll keep an eye on his next steps, he said. If he cleans up his portfolio, we might revisit. I could have left it there. That would have been enough. But then Peter called me. It had been months since our split, and suddenly, there he was on the other end of the phone, sounding smug and breezy. I hear you've landed on your feet, he said. Working for Ellis Vaughn, no less. Quite the comeback for someone who is ready to settle into retirement. I bit my tongue. What do you want, Peter? I wanted to give you a heads up, he said. Noah's going places. He's making some big plays. You might want to, smooth things over. Make sure you're on his good side. I laughed short, sharp, and without joy. You're warning me to stay on your son's good side? He's the future, Celeste. People like you, well, you had your time. And, just like that, it wasn't about a bad breakup anymore. It was a declaration. A reminder. In Peter's eyes, I was past my prime. Disposable. Replaceable. Only this time, I wasn't going to nod and swallow it. The Monday after Peter's call, I walked into the office with a plan forming in my mind. I didn't want to humiliate him outright, not yet. I wanted him to feel it slow, like cold water rising inch by inch around his ankles. So I made myself more visible, especially in the firm's external partnerships. I asked Ellis for more face time with our real estate investors and key clients. When I showed up, dressed sharply and speaking fluently about market trends, risk management, and portfolio diversification, people listened. Ellis, to his credit, never once undermined me. He let me speak, and then he backed me. Together, we began drawing attention. Words started getting around. Not only had I bounced back, but I was now a gatekeeper at one of the most selective firms in the region. 2 weeks later, I heard that Noah had reapplied, this time trying to land a smaller joint deal with one of our satellite offices. I reviewed the request, flagged inconsistencies again, and passed it on to Ellis. It was denied without a second glance. And then something happened that took me entirely by surprise. Ellis asked me to dinner. Not a work dinner. Not a client thing. Just the two of us. We went to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, and as the lights flickered below us, he asked me how I was really doing. I told him the truth, that I'd been angry for months and hurt even longer. But I also told him how much I appreciated the dignity he had shown me. He smiled and reached for my hand, saying softly, "People don't see value when they're intimidated by it. But I've always seen you clearly." Something changed that night. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was personal power returning, and with it, the chance to write my own story. 2 days later, Peter stormed into our office. No appointment. No warning. He barged past reception and into the conference room where Ellis and I were reviewing upcoming development plans. His face was flushed, and his voice cracked like thunder. "This is what you've been doing," he snapped at me. "Sabotaging my son's business because you're bitter?" Ellis stood calmly, his presence solid and unfazed. "Peter, you're interrupting a private meeting." Peter ignored him. He turned his rage fully on me. "You're clinging to the scraps of a career that should have ended 10 years ago. This job, this firm, it's a last act for washed-up women who don't know when to sit down." Ellis cut in, his voice cool. "That's enough." But I didn't flinch. I simply looked Peter in the eye and said, "Noah's business is failing because he inherited your arrogance and none of your insight. If you want someone to blame, look in a mirror." Peter's mouth twitched, but he didn't speak. He turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. After he left, Ellis turned to me. "I had no idea he would come here." "I'm sorry." I shook my head. Don't apologize. He revealed himself, not me. What Peter didn't know, what made his outburst so ironic, was that Ellis and I had begun quietly dating. Discreetly. No fanfare. Just quiet evenings, thoughtful conversations, shared wine. Nothing about it was performative. It was sincere. Still, the irony wasn't lost on me. Peter had called me too old to matter, and here I was, not only thriving professionally, but dating the man whose signature could make or break his son's ambitions. It all came to a head during the annual City Business Gala. Ellis and I arrived together formally for the first time. He wore a charcoal suit with a subtle burgundy tie. I wore an emerald green gown that caught the light with every step. People noticed. Whispers trailed behind us, but Ellis only held my hand tighter. The event was packed with industry professionals, developers, city planners, venture partners. Peter was there, of course, schmoozing as usual. And Noah, looking gaunt and far too eager, was hanging around the bar with a tablet in hand, trying to pitch anyone who would listen. Halfway through the evening, one of our clients pulled me aside. "Did you see Noah's latest move?" he asked with a raised brow. "He's trying to undercut one of your Midtown projects. He's been meeting with your subcontractors behind your back." I thanked him, returned to our table, and told Ellis. He didn't raise his voice. He just sighed. So much for playing fair. Before the night ended, Ellis gave a short speech as one of the keynote honorees. And then he did something I never expected. He mentioned me. By name. He thanked me for stabilizing their internal operations, for sharpening the firm's strategic edge, and, most surprisingly, for bringing clarity, strength, and elegance into my life. The entire room turned. Peter, frozen by the bar, watched it all happen. His jaw twitched. Noah, standing beside him, turned a shade paler. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The night had done the work for me. As the applause died down, Ellis stepped back to me and whispered, "Shall we go?" And we left hand in hand, past every person who once wrote me off. The Monday after the gala, the silence on Peter's end was almost amusing. I expected a storm, a visit, some desperate counterattack. Instead, there was nothing. The kind of silence that hangs in the air before a fall. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to hold this kind of quiet power, to know something they don't. Because what Peter didn't know, couldn't possibly have known, was that Ellis and I had been preparing something long before that gala. Months ago, after Peter's first inappropriate outburst and Noah's second rejected pitch, Ellis began auditing some of the old regional partnership accounts, ones Peter used to be heavily involved in when he had influence through his board contacts. What Ellis found was damning. Peter had funneled investor funds from one of his past projects into a shell company. That company then paid a consultant, Noah, who never declared the income. On paper, it looked like a mess of failed deals and blurred invoices. In reality, it was a carefully veiled attempt to finance Noah's failing business with money Peter no longer had legal access to. Ellis handed it all over to our firm's legal counsel. They reviewed every transaction, every signature, and after a month of quiet work behind the scenes, we submitted a formal report to the board. The fallout was swift. Peter was officially barred from any further involvement with the firm's clients or contractors. The board stripped him of emeritus status. Any lingering equity he still held was frozen pending investigation. His reputation, once polished to a fault, now carried a deep crack. And then there was Noah. His business, already gasping, flatlined within a month. A whistleblower at his company came forward, alleging unethical borrowing practices, unpaid invoices, and falsified growth reports. Ellis never spoke to him directly. There was no need. But I heard through mutual contacts that Noah blamed me. Of course he did. He sent one email. Just one. "You're not who I thought you were. I hope this was worth it." I didn't reply. Instead, I met Ellis for dinner that night at the same rooftop restaurant where our story had quietly begun. This time, He didn't just hold my hand, he leaned across the table and asked me, gently but firmly, if I'd consider stepping into a partner role officially. Not just in the firm, in his life. I blinked, tears threatening, but didn't let them fall. After everything? I asked, voice hushed. He smiled. Because of everything. You didn't just survive, Elise. You changed the temperature in every room you walked into. You don't need anyone to approve of your worth. But I'd be honored to stand beside it. For a moment, I could see Peter's face again, smug, cruel, dismissive, and I let it go. He had tried to cut me down by calling me too old, too used, too late. And yet here I was, standing taller, clearer, and more powerful than ever before. Dating a man he respected, holding a position he once craved, and bringing down the illusions he had built, brick by stolen brick. That was the revenge. Not public shaming, not shouting matches or angry emails, but peace. I didn't just prove Peter wrong. I rendered him irrelevant. Months passed, and with each one, I felt lighter. The whispers faded. The judgments dulled. What once felt like a wall built from years of being overlooked and labeled too old crumbled behind me, stone by stone. I didn't just reclaim my worth. I redesigned the space around it. Ellis and I didn't make any grand announcements. We didn't need to. We simply lived, showed up at board meetings together, walked into functions as equals, and let the silence from those who used to laugh behind my back speak louder than anything else. Peter never recovered his status. His name slipped from the circles he once ruled, replaced by younger, more transparent voices. He still existed in the industry, of course, but no one looked at him the same way. And the real sting for him? It wasn't the money or the title. It was that I'd become everything he said I wasn't capable of being and more. Noah disappeared from view. I don't know where he ended up. Part of me used to check, to skim headlines or listen for gossip. But that faded too. Because revenge isn't about dragging someone into the dirt. It's about no longer caring whether they get up from it. My life now? It's not perfect. But it's honest. I spend my mornings in meetings where my voice is not only heard, it's requested. I travel with Ellis when we can, speak at conferences about leadership transformation, and mentor women who have been told the same things I once believed. You're too old. You missed your chance. You should have done more when you were younger. No, you are never too old to start again. You are never too late to outgrow someone's narrow expectations. And you are never out of options, only out of patience for those who try to shrink you. I used to think love had to come first, that I had to be loved to feel valuable. Now I know better. Respect yourself first. The rest will follow. And sometimes, when it follows, it wears a tailored suit and walks beside you without needing to dim your light. So let me ask you this. Has anyone ever told you it's too late to start over? If they have, maybe it's time you proved them wrong. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments.